What's up, guys? My name's Caleb Lee. I'm a realtor in the Little Rock, Central Arkansas area. I wanted to go over with you guys subject to, it's mainly pertaining to anyone that's wanting to buy and invest in real estate. It's not really pertaining to people that are just wanting to buy a home traditionally. This doesn't really make sense for that. I would just advise going and using a VA loan or a FHA loan. It's like 3% down or 0% down if you're in the military. And that makes way more sense than having to go find this very niche situation. But if you're an investor, completely different story. You are trying to buy property pretty much every single month if you're pretty seasoned in real estate. And one of the biggest bottlenecks that you come across as a real estate investor is the fact that when you buy property, you have two ways to buy. That's going to be cash or using debt. Most people aren't the son of Bill Gates, so they don't have a big reserve of millions of dollars to buy, $400,000 home here, $400,000 home here. They'll run out of money pretty quick if they start doing it like that. So what most investors do is they go and get a loan. They'll use debt from their local bank. They'll put 20% down, and the bank will finance the other 80% at whatever interest rate that might be going at that point. Right now, it's like 7%. And that's how most people do it. And it works great. The biggest drawback to that is that 20% can still be pretty hefty if you're buying a $300,000 or $400,000 home. It's still $60,000 to $80,000 of cash that you have to put up front in order to acquire the rest of that financing that the bank's offering. So one of the cool things about Subject 2 is it allows you to get around that need for capital to scale your portfolio. Let's say 10 deals come across your lap every single week or every single month, depending on how big you are at this point. And 5 of those deals either, don't have enough equity or they have a real weird situation about them. But they have a mortgage that's at maybe 4%, 5%. If you are just using your mind to think of what's the best way to lowball cash offer, you're losing money on all these deals that you're not buying, because some of these deals just don't pencil out if you're trying to come $60,000, $70,000 below what they owe. I mean, most people can't cut a check for 50 grand and take a loss on it. And if they can, they're probably not in a situation financially where they're in a foreclosure in the first place, because that's a ton of money to just cut a check for. So these situations that you're looking for are pretty particular. So if you're passing up on that, that's maybe a deal a month that you're not buying for relatively pretty cheap. So if you if you're willing to get creative, those 4 to 5 deals that come across your lap that don't have any equity, if you look at them through the lens of a creative financing investor, it could make a lot more sense and allow you to scale quicker. And just for an example of what we did, this guy, we'll call him Craig, I don't want to give his personal information away. He was going through a foreclosure. He had bought the home. It was a brand new Rosh Coleman home built 3 years ago. And he bought it with a VA loan. So if you know anything about amortization schedules, all that interest was front loaded. So even after 3 years, he'd been making those payments. He basically had no equity to show for it at this point, even after 3 years of payments. So in order for him to sell, he would have to have cut a check to sell the home. So most of the investors that came in, again, were offering, pre-foreclosure just popped up. They immediately called, hey, would you take 210, even though he owed, 240 or 235 or something like that. He said, I can't do that. I'd have to cut a check. I don't have the money to cut a check just to sell my home. I'd like to make some money, but I definitely don't want to pay you to take my house from me. And from most of the investors, no one was really able to help him out. One investor did offer Subject 2, but they said there wasn't enough equity in it. That's kind of another video talking about wraps and everything else. That's actually what we ended up doing. I was going to go into it, but I think that's better for just another episode. That's kind of a different strategy completely, which is selling on a wrap. We're really just talking about acquiring property through Subject 2 and why it's so beneficial. So we ended up taking his mortgage. It was at 4.3% interest over 30 years. That's around $1,200 a month. We saw that the rent rate for the house across the street was about $1,800. That's give or take, $600 of cash flow a month once we get it rented. So while there was no equity and we were completely leveraged 100% whenever we caught up the $30,000 that he was behind to reinstate his mortgage, we see the cash flow there as the biggest advantage, and the fact that it's a 4.5% loan. And as a long-term buy and holder, the lifetime amount we're going to pay in interest on a 4% loan versus a 7% loan is pretty tremendous. I mean, it's significantly bigger whenever you start paying for a 7% mortgage over 10 years by a sum of like $100,000 to $200,000 that you're shaving off if you're getting a 4% loan. So without going into the further details of how we ended up offloading it and making our money back up, the subjects to allowed us to buy a property that when it came across most of these other investors' laps, they just passed up on it because most of the time they're paying cash for a junker that's like $80,000, and they'll put 60 into it and sell for 250, and they don't want to get creative. This is just another way that you can buy properties. It allowed us to get into it for pretty cheap. It was 10% down, give or take, and we didn't have to do any bank checks, no tax checks, any tax incomes, third grade report card, that whole type of thing. It was relatively pretty easy. And allowed us to scale a portfolio, buy another property that otherwise we would have not have gotten if we didn't want to go with subject to. So if you guys have any interest in buying properties and maybe you can't get qualified, or you have that same bottleneck that a lot of other investors have where they just don't have the capital, they can see a cash flowing deal and they want it, but they just don't have the capital. If you could just reach out to me, I'll leave my contact information below, and I'll leave my Instagram card and everything else. So if you guys will just DM me or shoot me a text or a call at 501-350-0009, I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. Other than that, have a great Memorial Day, and thank you so much.